Thank you, Justice Suresh, for opening the discussion today and bringing issues around mercy and clemency also into the discussion. Can I invite Professor Rajendra, who will now make his comments? Yeah.
Yes.
There's a request that whoever can speak in Hindi could please also try that.
I'm very sorry, I will speak in English. I also felt that it would be good if some of us spoke in Hindi. I'm going to read a statement which is being translated in Hindi, so hopefully I'll be able to read it later, but I will speak in English. When I was in the bus on the way to the venue this morning, I was trying to think of arguments against the death penalty. Not because I need arguments. For me, it's not required. The death penalty is barbaric, inhuman, repulsive, and there's nothing wrong sometimes in making up our minds without arguments based on habits of thoughts or even emotions that have proved to be good guides to action in other contexts. So I don't need arguments, and I think most of you don't need arguments either. But when we need to convince others, as we will have to if we want to achieve the abolition of the death penalty, we will need arguments. So since I like round numbers, I thought, let me see if I can come up with 10 arguments against the death penalty, which sounded like a pretty high objective, but I think I managed to get 10 arguments. So since I have 10 minutes, I'll quickly shoot 10 arguments and let you decide what you think about them. The first 4 arguments, which I think are the main arguments, are made in a statement called "We Oppose the Death Penalty," which many of you have, I think, have already signed, and if you have not signed, and if you would like to sign, you're welcome to sign today. It will be released anytime today or tomorrow, or at most on Monday. And it is a statement that has been signed by more than 300 eminent citizens, including lawyers, judges, activists, economists, writers, businessmen and women, artists, actors. There was a deliberate effort to reach out to a broad section across the whole political spectrum in the hope of building a broad-based coalition, and I was happily surprised to find that virtually nobody refused to sign. There was one abstention. Nobody said, I will refuse to sign this statement, and that confirmed me in the conviction that it is possible to build a broad coalition on this issue. So here is the statement. It's a very simple, straightforward statement. It says, "We, concerned citizens and organizations from different walks of life and with different worldviews, are united in opposing the death penalty and demanding its repeal in India. Though meant only for the rarest of rare crimes, the death penalty is widely being applied to an ever-increasing array of offences, so much so that presently there are about 477 persons sentenced to death in India, and between 7 and 21 people in imminent danger of execution as their mercy petitions have been rejected by the President." This was in August, it's slightly out of date, but mercy petitions are being rejected at an unprecedented rate. At the same time, executions and rejections of mercy petitions are being done secretly without any scrutiny and in violation of due process. The death penalty is objectionable for at least the following reasons, and these are my first 4 arguments. First, the death penalty is a cruel and barbaric punishment. It inflicts inhuman suffering on the condemned and his family while doing nothing to alleviate the loss and suffering of the victims of crime. Number 2, the death penalty serves no purpose. Studies have shown that the death penalty does not deter murder or protect society any more than life imprisonment. 3, the death penalty is inflicted in an arbitrary, inconsistent and unfair manner. It targets the poor, marginalized and the oppressed and depends more on the personal predilections of the decision maker rather than on the facts of the case. Number 4, the death penalty is irreversible and cannot be part of a system that is not error-free. Courts have repeatedly acknowledged that the death penalty has been wrongly inflicted in a large number of cases, in 2 of which the condemned prisoners have already been executed. More than 70% of the world's nations, about 150 out of 198, are abolitionist in law or in practice, including most of Europe, Africa, South America, and the Pacific region, and each year the number is increasing. Many countries with lower human development indices and higher murder rates than India eschew the death penalty. India, however, still lingers in the company of authoritarian regimes that execute people in violation of international standards. The time to set this right is long overdue. We resolve to work for the abolition of the death penalty in our respective domains of action and influence. We appeal to all concerned citizens to join this cause. The 5th argument comes from a separate statement that was sent by Amartya Sen, who doesn't normally sign joint petitions, so he did not sign this petition that I just read, but he sent a separate statement which I'm quickly going to read. It's quite short. It says, "I am delighted to see the solidarity statement in opposition to the death penalty. Since I have been committed to the abolition of the death penalty throughout my life, I am very happy to add my voice to those of others who want the repeal of this terrible legal provision. I do not sign joint statements as a general rule, and hence this separate letter affirming my own opposition to the death penalty. The solidarity statement has already captured 4 of the main arguments for abolition. 1, that the death penalty is barbaric and cruel. 2, that its efficacy in preventing murder and other crimes is fictitious. 3, that the use of the death penalty tends to be biased and unequal over different segments of the population. And 4, that all punitive systems can make errors and the irreversibility of the death penalty does not allow any correction of mistakes. To those 4 weighty arguments can be added a 5th. Any attempt to remedy the harm done by the taking of one life through taking another life encourages bad and indeed dangerous moral reasoning. The approach of death penalty is fundamentally misconceived." The 6th argument, in a sense, is an amplification of the first point, that the death penalty is cruel and barbaric. And the point is that the death penalty is not just taking life, it is a form of torture. When you see the manner in which the sentence is prolonged over a long period of time, and in which indeed the execution takes place, as we have seen recently. This point was made quite well by the French writer Albert Camus many years ago, when he said an execution is not simply death. It is just as different from taking life as a concentration camp is from prison. For there to be an equivalency, he means an equivalency between the crime and the punishment. For there to be an equivalency, the death penalty would have to punish a criminal who had warned his victim of the date at which he would inflict a horrible death to him, and who from that moment onward had confined him at his mercy for months. In fact, in this case it would be even years. Such a monster is not encountered in private life. So he's saying, if the idea is that you are giving people what they deserve and that the punishment is proportional to the crime, it would have to be a crime where you not only kill the person, but you announce the killing months or years in advance, and then you keep that person confined in the intervening period, and then you inflict the death in a horrible manner. The 7th argument is that opposing the death penalty, to my mind, is part of the general need to resist the excessive power of the state, particularly so in India, where we're seeing a state which is extremely powerful, potentially very violent, not just potentially, but also actually, in many cases, very violent, and always trying to extend its powers, whether it's through repression, surveillance, UID, and so on. And I think that any a citizen committed to democracy has at every step to resist that concentration of power, and opposition to the death penalty is part of that. Eighth argument is that the death penalty detracts from the country's commitment to democratic values, such as it is. One can take a different view as to how committed the country really is. I feel the democratic rights that have been achieved have some value and have to be defended at every step. And from that point of view, it's sad to see in the company of a smaller and increasingly small number of countries like China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, very few of them with any sort of democratic institutions that continue to have the death penalty, and almost all democratic countries have already abolished it.
US is an exception.
Sorry? US is the main exception. I don't, because time is short, I don't go into the details, but you're absolutely right. US is the main exception, absolutely. Ninth argument, which is quite important for me, is that the death penalty fosters a culture of violence. I am not among those who believe that all violence is wrong. I think there are some circumstances where violence, at least limited violence, is justified. But I do believe that violence can and should be abolished from human affairs, and that it is possible, perfectly possible, for human society to exist without any violence, and that we must strive towards that goal. And to the extent that an institution like the death penalty interferes with that goal, I would oppose it. I found it difficult to find a 10th argument. I could fall back on the crass economic argument that taking away somebody's life involves a loss of output, but I think that instead of doing that, I will listen to the other speakers, and I'm sure that by the end of the day, I will have at least one more argument to complete the set of 10. Thank you.